hold on one moment. I'm just arranging a couple of things to make this go smoothly. Becky, I'm not
You don't have
co-host.
to worry about me, I can see the dark.
I guess it'll be all right.
Becky, I'm not co-host yet.
Okay.
I just want to do two little housekeeping things on the screen so that we here in Town Hall have everyone where we need them.
Okay, co-host.
Town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. You're here, Eric.
I am here.
This will come to me here. Hopefully we will see it. Okay. All right. So I will call the select board. Is Geneva here? I just want to make sure she's here before we start. Geneva, are you on the screen somewhere? Or is she attending? Okay.
I think we're good.
Okay. If you're good? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to call the select board meeting to order. And the first thing we're going to do is look at the review the agenda. Becky, it's all up to date online, right? Yes, we're good. Okay. So the first thing we have is review the minutes from August 8th and 9th of 2003. Next, we have an appointment for an assistant electrical inspector. I'm sorry. The next is an appointment of a new planning board member, a ZBA associate member. Planning board, at 5:50, we have a planning board discussion with the select board, an associate member, home rule petition testimony to legislature. At 6, we'll review the local wetland bylaw regulations with Attorney McGregor. 7 p.m., Mary Jo Maffey is going to present a potential knotweed task force idea to us. At 7:15, the Select Board and COA review the Council on Aging recent transportation survey. At 7:25, we have a Cemetery Commission CPA contract for review. At 7:30, approval of the November Turkey Trot event. At 7:35, we have our town administrator updates of the ones listed on the agenda and more if there has been. And we have one unanticipated business, which is to recommendation from our Highway Superintendent Search Committee to the Select Board to consider. Okay. With all of that said, we have a quite packed night, so I think we're going to move right on to reviewing the minutes from August 8th and 9th. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from August 8th, 2023?
So moved. I do have one question.
Okay.
Do we attach those flow charts?
I'll second.
Yeah, I got it. Do we attach those flow charts to these minutes? So,
Oh, yes.
yeah, okay. Then in that case, I'm okay with these.
You're good?
Yep.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes on August 8th?
Stalker, aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye. Do I hear a motion for the August 9th, 2023 minutes?
So moved.
Okay, I'll second that. Is there any questions or comments? I did not.
I have none. No.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of approving August 9th minutes, 2023?
Stalker, aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye. Okay. We've caught up. We are here now to the agenda and to appoint Assistant Electrical Inspector. Becky, would you like to give us an overview?
Yes, I am also hoping that Mo Gregoire is here.
I'm going to check the list.
Do not see him. Mo Gregoire is our current electrical inspector and has been for many, many years. He had an assistant who was active for a long time, but now is stepping down. And he has recommended that we appoint Josh Kingsbury to be the new Assistant Electrical Inspector. I'm sorry, Josh, I guess there's been some confusion. Josh was at last week,
Yeah.
at the meeting
Yeah,
2
yeah,
weeks
yeah.
ago, and I had set up for tonight, so I think we'll proceed with it.
Okay.
So at least you got to see him at last
We
week's
did.
meeting.
Yeah,
We did.
And you know he was responsive and interested.
He was. Okay. Do I hear a motion to appoint, give me the name one more time, Becky, I'm sorry. Josh Kingsbury for the Assistant Electrical Inspector.
So moved.
Okay, I'll second that. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of appointing Josh?
Stalker, aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye. Thanks, Josh. All right, moving on to appointment of a new planning board member. Appoint new ZBA associate member under the home rule. I'm sorry, I'm skipping. So
So for this item, we have an appointment. Okay, so just to give context, Jeff Lacy, who has been on the planning board for 27 years, I think, I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong, has officially resigned as of today, the 12th of September. This creates an opening on the planning board, and the recommendation that was brought forth was that that Ashley Pycroft, who has been active for about 3 years as an associate planning board member, be appointed to fill this new vacancy on the planning board.
okay,
And this is a joint vote between the two boards, the planning board and the select board. And I believe,
Becky, this is Nathan. I don't have a quorum yet. So I'm going to ask that you proceed with the ZBA associate member appointment. And then we'll see where we are in the next few minutes here.
okay,
thank you, Nathan.
so there's 7 members, so you need one more person?
That's right.
Okay, okay, I'll keep my eye out. All right, so
Okay.
the other situation that Jeff's departure is creating is that he is also stepping down as stepping down as chair of the ZBA. And at this point, he would like to be appointed as a ZBA associate member, so that the ZBA still has some support. John Thompson. Hi, John. You are now a full ZBA member, correct? Or no, you need to be appointed as a full ZBA member as well.
That's right.
So that's the action that has to happen first. And then we would appoint Jeff as the new associate member, because John is currently the associate member. John, are you resigning as the associate member, or did you already?
How do I have to do that? I'm not sure what the mechanism is.
You can send us an email, but tonight if you could just do it verbally, I think given the situation, the select board would accept the verbal if you follow it up with a written resignation email.
Yeah, I'd like to resign as the associate ZBA member.
Okay. So, we need to vote to accept that. Sure. Okay, so, all in favor of accepting John Thompson's, resignation from the ZBA?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Stalker, aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye. Okay,
Okay.
now you're free. John, just follow that up with an email, please, okay?
Okay, so now, the next step would be to appoint John Thompson as a ZBA member.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to appoint John Thompson as the ZBA member?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Stocker, aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
Okay, thank you very much, John. And the final action will be to appoint Jeff Lacy as an associate member. He has stated that this will be, not a long-term, it'll be a short-term appointment.
All right, do I hear a motion to appoint Jeff Lacy as the ZBA associate member?
So moved.
All those in, I'll second that. All those in favor?
Stocker, aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
I also like to thank Jeff for his work for both these
Yeah.
committees and the town in general for years, so
Thank you very much.
cheers.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Jeff, for all your. Oh, there he is.
There he is, he's right there. Okay, and that was it for the, Nathan, do you see?
Yeah, we have a
Everybody
quorum now. I'll call the planning board to order.
All right,
Members present, I see myself, Michael DeCiara, Deacon Bonner, Jeff Weston, and Robert Raymond.
okay.
That's what I see.
And Ashley Pycroft, the associate member, is here as well.
Okay. All right,
I do not see Ashley at the moment, no.
Ashley is here.
yes,
she?
I do see her,
Yeah.
yes, on the list here.
Okay.
I can't
Good.
point.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't realize we had 2 pages.
We do, yes.
Okay, all right. There may be more planning board members present. Let's see.
Go ahead and look and let us know if you'd
All
like.
right. I don't see anyone else from the planning board.
So Nathan, you're bringing Ashley Pycroft forward to us to be a planning board member, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, last night the planning board voted unanimously that we move to this joint session to consider appointing Ashley as a full planning board member.
Ashley, can you turn on your microphone or camera? And the select board may want to ask some questions.
Hello.
Hi, there you
Yeah,
are.
I got my camera on.
I'm sorry. It's 2 pages of
Yeah,
attendees.
it's okay. I know about big Zoom meetings.
Can you give us a little introduction of yourself and let us know why you'd like to be on the planning board?
Sure. Well, so I've been before this board a couple of times now to be appointed as associate member. And I'm pleased that the planning board has confidence in me to join fully. I'm, taking Mr. Lacy's position. So we're losing a wealth of knowledge and experience and all of that. And I am brand new to all of this, to town government specifically. So I've lived in Shutesbury for 20 years on Baker Road in the same house, and really in the Baker Schoolhouse Triangle since the late 90s. So I'm very familiar with the neighborhood and I love the town. Since living here, I've participated in town government when possible, just attending town meetings, especially before I had my child. And it's really the advent of solar development in town that got me more involved. I'm a close abutter to a piece of land that was potential for development. So I just started attending meetings just to learn the possibilities of what might happen, and became pretty clear on what the planning board does and our bylaws and the role of the Conservation Commission and all of that, and was approached and nudged by some neighbors to consider the associate member position. And so came on that way. As far as my experience goes, I really can't say enough about being part of the PTO at the elementary school. I know it's not an elected position, nor does it really have voting power, but while I was on the PTO, we went through the 501c3 process. So I learned pretty quickly Robert's Rules of Order and the different roles of executive boards and executive session and all that kind of stuff. So useful experience there. And, I was on there with Beth Wilson, who's on the Conservation Commission now. So it's kind of a spawning ground, I imagine, for a lot of people to get involved in town government. And I am a high school teacher. I have been, this is my 20th year as a high school teacher as well. And I teach some basic law at Belchertown High School. So in that capacity, I've read statute. I've taught it a little bit here and there. And so have some familiarity with how things work. Also in that capacity, you know, I have to make a million decisions a day. And most of the time it's like, can I go to the bathroom? Can I, you know, go get a drink, that kind of stuff. But a lot of times it's consequential. And so there are pieces of that I think will be useful. I can make a decision that's a big deal in public and keep a cool head, I think. And I just have a lot of experience dealing with the public in general. And I do have concerns about being on the planning board. You know, I'm a mom raising a teenager. My husband and I don't have a whole heck of a lot of support outside of our little family as far as dealing with him. So I feel I'm entering the realm of a lot of moms and dads who want to take part in democracy and want to serve in town government, but maybe are a little limited in our resources and our capacity. But I'm going to do my best. I'm a sucker for democracy. I love that townspeople take part. I think I have a pretty good understanding of town. I've appreciated being a neighbor of Coles for all these years and their stewardship of the land, and also, you know, understand the beauty of our town and our wildlife and the concerns of people. And while I don't bring a lot of experience to the planning board, I think the board itself just has a wealth of experience, and I hope to just you know, piggyback on that and learn as I go.
You had said something about being a butter to a potential solar site, and did the planning board tell you have to go through a process or the determining of a financial benefit or not of your property because you are in a butter to the?
There's no permit.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
have, no, it's okay. I haven't gotten specific instruction from the planning board on that, but the site that, of course, there's no special permits before the town. So, you know, we don't know anything yet, but the site behind my house on Baker Road is likely, based on just my personal knowledge from attending meetings, to not be one of the ones that's going to be developed. It's quite wet. So, and I have received butter notices from the landowner multiple times and have attended meetings and learned about it that way. Not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. Do you have any questions?
No.
I just have one more that I've asked many others. So can you give an example of when you've had to make a decision that might be against your personal opinion for the better of a larger group or a larger project?
Yeah, let me think about it. I mean, I've never been part of an elected board that makes the kind of consequential decisions that the planning board does. I guess the closest I could give is in my capacity as a high school teacher, needing to put my strong and clear political, emotionally invested beliefs aside in order to support students who have very different ideas than me, and who I know, you know, their families have different ideas, and I want to make sure that I'm not putting them in a comfortable position or violating any sort of ethical standards in my capacity as a, you know, a public servant to them.
Great. This has to be a joint vote, and I don't remember, the last time we did select board and then planning board, or we did it kind of all together. Becky, do you remember how we did
I
it?
think you can start with the select board and then continue on with the planning board, because it's, I believe it's the total of both
All of
boards.
us? Okay.
I think there's a total of both boards, and, you know, if I recall correctly, you know, there'll be a motion, someone will second it, and it's a joint, you know, essentially we're combining to form one public body.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Ethan. So do I hear a motion to appoint I'm sorry, Ashley Pycroft to the planning board as a planning
So
board member.
moved.
Oh, thank you. All right. All second?
Second.
Okay, all right. All in favor?
Stalker, aye.
Make O'Neill, aye.
Murphy, aye.
Weston, aye.
Take care, aye.
Wrestler, aye.
Okay.
Raymond, aye.
Deacon?
Honor, aye.
And Deacon, okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's everyone. We, Steve Bressler came in, well, things were going on, but he's good.
I heard
Thank
enough.
you.
I heard enough to vote.
So, the next,
The
you know, I
next
just,
thing is board discussion.
Oh, name
right, and, you know, Melissa, if I just want to touch briefly on, there was another, agenda item we had, and, I may have been confused about this, but another vote that we took last night was to appoint, Cliff Reed, or recommend Cliff Reed as the, planning board designee to the CPC, and, I apologize, I ended up walking away from that, without a clear idea of whether that vote was final or whether the select board will take our recommendation and move forward with it. I understand it's not on your agenda right now, but I wanted to just inform you that that vote was done and for you to take action is needed. Maybe we can follow up offline or whatnot, but whatever is, let us know if we need to take any further action on that.
Yeah. Becky will be in contact with,
Yeah,
Becky will be
I'll
in
put it on the
contact
agenda.
and we can certainly do it on our next meeting agenda or, to get you all set with those.
Okay. And then moving on,
Yep.
there's
To
the
the home-
home rule petition, and Michael Daycare can speak to that.
Okay.
So I think, so Melissa and Eric, you guys got this email from me, I think it was last week, but just very quickly summarizing. About 2 years ago, town meeting passed the bylaw for associate members of the planning board. And the Attorney General came back and approved it, but only partially. Basically, they said that associate members in the state for planning boards can only deal with special permit issues, which was not our understanding, nor is Donna McNichol's understanding. Unfortunately, one cannot appeal the Attorney General. And so what Donna and another attorney suggested was that if we wanted to fulfill the intent of town meeting, that we would have to go the legislative route, which is one of two ways. The one that we selected was home rule petition. And then if you remember at town meeting this spring, town meeting voted to request a home rule petition, basically giving planning board associate members all the full rights and responsibilities similar to the associate members of a ZBA member. So they essentially, associate member could act in any function as an elected planning board member. So town meeting passed that. Grace sent a certified copy of the minutes to the legislature, both Aaron Saunders and Joe Comerford. It's now in front of the Joint Committee for Municipal Government, I believe it is. They are collecting testimony. The deadline for testimony is tomorrow. So last night, so I wrote a draft piece of testimony that the planning board approved last night, and we're ready to send that in, but we'd welcome the select board to be included in that, in which case I can just make a slight amendment and say I'm writing on behalf of the planning board and the select board. Nothing else changes. So it's really up to you guys if you would like to be included in that testimony. But the reason we have to submit it is Shutesbury is asking for home rule for our town. If we don't submit testimony basically advocating that we think this is a good idea, there's no reason the legislature would approve it. If we make that argument, it seems like it would go through unless someone has some major objection. So if you have questions.
Do you have any questions?
No, I think we should do it.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to sign on to the planning board testimony for the home rule petition?
So move.
All those in favor?
Stalker, aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
Great. And just to say out loud, since the planning board's here, I will just add the select board, as we discussed last night, to the beginning sentence of that letter that basically says, I'm writing on behalf of the planning board and the select board. There's no other substantive changes that should occur. And I'll send a copy to Becky and Grace, so they have copies of it once I've submitted it.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Thanks, Michael.
all right, moving on to,
Melissa, before we move on, I'd just like to close the planning board open meeting.
I'm sorry.
No, it's quite all right. We don't do this often enough so that it's like clockwork, you know, it's kind of, we have to fumble through it every time, but that's all right. All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All right, who moved, and was it Robert moved?
Robert, yes.
Okay, so Robert moved, Michael seconds. Any discussion? I'm just gonna make a quick note of discussion that we are closing the meeting without covering one of our agenda items for associate planning board member. You know, we did not have that on the select board agenda, so we're not gonna deal with that today. With that, I'll take the roll to close the meeting. DeCiara,
Aye.
Bonner,
Aye.
Weston. It looked like an aye. I didn't hear. I'm going to count that as an aye. Raymond.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And Bressler.
Aye.
Okay, and I'm an aye. I don't know if we do we count Ashley? Is that effective immediately, or does she have to get sworn in by the town clerk first?
I believe she needs to be sworn in by the town clerk.
All right, thank you for clarification. All right, that concludes the planning board meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You.
All right, so we're moving on to our 6 o'clock review of the local wetland bylaw regulations with attorney Gregor McGregor. Before we get started with that, I have something I'd like to address to those here in the room. There's been some discussion out on Nextdoor, and I just want to point out a fact of misinformation that was out there. So the misinformation was that the select board did not invite the Concom to this meeting. And I just want to remind those that are here, some of you were at this original meeting. The select board met with the Concom on August 9th at 7:30 in a joint meeting. At that meeting, the select board invited a Concom to hold a joint meeting with the select board, Concom, attorney McGregor, and attorney Goodman to review the Concom regulations. At that meeting, the commission and the Conservation Commission chair declined the invitation and to participate in the format that we had proposed, and to participate in this format. So we were left with the option, and later decided at a subsequent select board meeting to go ahead and invite attorney McGregor to review the Concom regulations and the liability that's to the town. And this is that we're having this event tonight. So just to clarify, the Concom did decline to participate in that meeting. So I'd like to open it up to the Mr. McGregor, attorney McGregor, and he is here and he's spent some time looking over the wetland regulations for the select board and been in contact with Rita. This is the first time that Eric and I are having a chance to meet, because as many of you know, on the meeting, there's open meeting law and we are not able to do that in the three of us. So attorney McGregor, I'd like to welcome you to our select board meeting and give you time to present some of your thoughts on the regulations and the work you've done for us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being retained again as special counsel on environmental matters, this time to comment on the draft regulations currently being considered by the Conservation Commission as presently proposed to be promulgated as the official regulations of the Commission. I went back to our original comments on the prior draft I tracked them digitally through this draft, and I've identified which of our prior recommendations were taken and which were not. And the result is a list of legal issues that remain. The board asked me essentially to focus on legal issues that would be of concern if they could lead to legal claims in appeals, or else make enforcement difficult, or leave the town vulnerable to have to defend any challenges to the bylaw or to decisions made under it. Do I have correct from your board that focus? Is that your focus?
Yes, I believe that is our
Yes.
focus, yes.
Thank you very much. Now, I identified the changes made, and I informed you through your administrator that there are many changes made in the draft regulations that are favorable. That is, I compliment the commission on adopting many of the recommendations and cautions and legal issues that we identified before. There are, however, remaining issues in the current draft. Despite the several improvements that I compliment the commission on, the remaining issues are many and serious. Now, earlier this week and today, I prepared an email listing these issues. I want to see if you have received that email and whether you're going to consider it tonight, or shall I send it tomorrow?
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you for a little bit, you broke up, so we don't know the question.
Oh, I sent a email listing the issues that remain in our opinion. Has that been given to the select board? And is that before the members?
We do
Yes.
have that, yes.
Yeah, we
All right.
are.
Well, thank you. Well, I heard you list on the agenda this topic for an hour. Is that how long you would like to spend on this?
Would you mind, maybe walking through a little bit of the email you sent? The public hasn't seen it, and, I
Okay.
think this is part of what we, to give a summary of what you sent us today.
Okay.
And then I've got a couple of questions. Eric might have a few
All right.
questions.
I will present what's in the email, but I won't read it verbatim.
Oh, no, not asking you to do that.
And when I'm done with each point, I'll put it in English.
Okay, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Okay. These draft regulations assert legal jurisdiction over vernal pools. They define vernal pools, they state their significance, and they say they occur everywhere in town. These bylaws require, first of all, that anybody with a vernal pool on their property apply for permission from the Conservation Commission if they wish to do any work or activity in or affecting the vernal pool or within 100 feet. And then the regulations say no such work will be allowed. Now, in our opinion, since vernal pools are not mentioned in the bylaw, which is the enabling legislation for these regulations, bylaw needs to be amended before regulations can be enacted to protect vernal pools with this degree of specificity everywhere in town. Also, because virtually nothing is allowed. That is, these regulations announce that virtually nothing will be allowed in vernal pools or the nearby area called the aura. In other words, there's a presumed prohibition. These areas, which can be as small as a puddle or as large as a small pond, will be off limits to everything. Now, the bylaw does allow the town to assert jurisdiction over isolated wetlands. But the problem with using that term, which this bylaw, what the regulations do as a bootstrap to get to vernal pools, is that vernal pools by themselves do not contain water all year, except in drought. They do not fit the definition of isolated wetlands because they don't contain water year round except in drought. They contain water every year in the spring, and then they dry out for the rest of the year. So I repeat, extending jurisdiction, including permit requirements for vernal pools everywhere when the bylaw does not give a list of resource areas, including vernal pools, leaves the regulations vulnerable. And I think they're also questionable because they announce ahead of time you can't get permits for anything in or affecting vernal pools. Next, the regulations state the burden of proof on applicants in two places is to prove their application is approvable by clear and convincing evidence. That's the legal term used. That is not the term in the bylaw. That is holding all applicants under these regulations to a stricter standard than the bylaw allows. You're aware there are different kinds of burdens of proof, depending on types of proceedings. And I won't go into what the burden of proof is. That is, who has to show what to what satisfaction in an administrative proceeding in front of a local board that's reviewable in court or in DEP. However, I will tell you that clear and convincing evidence, which is a high bar, in our opinion, is beyond the authority in the bylaw, which is not that strict. We already recommended against this. The town cannot be legally stricter than the bylaw. The bylaw is the enabling legislation or the regulations, if you will. Town meeting is the legislature. The regulations are supposed to be flesh on the bones, but the bylaw doesn't have enough bones. Next, there's a no reasonable alternative or a no practical alternative test in the regulations. That is, applicants will have to show need to a level of there's no reasonable alternative or no practical alternative to doing this work in the resource area. We think that's a good idea to have that so-called alternative test. It's popular. It comes from the Rivers Protection Act, which was amended in 1987 to the Wetlands Protection Act. There's an alternative test for work in that 200-foot area around rivers, known as the riverfront area. You have to show a need to be there. Then you have to show you mitigated it and left the riverfront area better. I've just summarized a page of state regulations. Need and mitigate. But it is a high bar. It means the Conservation Commission will spend a lot more time and energy reviewing projects, not just ones before them, but the reasonableness of alternatives that they want studied. So it expands the length and depth of commission inquiry of applicants. And I think, in our opinion, the wording chosen about who has to show there's no reasonable alternative and what that means is not clear enough to be supported by the bylaw. The bylaw needs amending in this regard to explicitly allow imposition of this. Essentially, it's a prerequisite to getting approvals. In English, it would be, why are you here? Why do you need your house here? Why is this a configuration of your pool, house, and septic? Why are you locating that close to the wetland? Why can't you locate farther away? As between the wetland and the floodplain and your neighbors, why have you chosen this location with maximum impact? You understand how it works in English. It takes time and effort to do it right, and it's best to have the objective definitions of practical alternative or reasonable alternative in the bylaw. Next, you know your bylaw does have an old provision saying that the intent is to regulate significant or cumulative effects on wetland resources. Significant or
Senator
cumulative.
McGregor, Can I
Yes,
interrupt
you may.
you for a moment, Attorney McGregor? Can you speak a little louder to the microphone? It's cutting in and out a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yes. I'll move my microphone closer.
Your microphone is cutting in and out a little bit.
I'll speak directly into it.
I
Okay.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Rolling right along. This cumulative effects, and by extension, disapproving projects that have unacceptable adverse cumulative effects needs to be in the bylaw in more detail because of the court case I raised in my previous comments. City of Quincy versus City of Boston, a precedent-setting case that says a commission cannot rely on a general criterion and say they're not satisfied that cumulative effects have been disclosed, studied, and accounted for. They need objective standards and definitions of that sufficient for applicants to know what's the test they're trying to meet. It's a due process thing. Next, this draft empowers the commission to adopt its own BMPs for stormwater. That means best management practices. That's a term of art. Your DPW has them, the state has them, the planning board may have them, federal government imposes them for developments it's involved with. And this would say the commission is going to adopt its own formal BMPs. First observation is this will have to be in regulations later. If they're in mere guidance or a memo or a handbook, they won't be binding, won't be enforceable. My point legally is these issued by the Conservation Commission as now a stormwater board may conflict with those of the DPW in your town, DEP, the planning board for subdivisions and the like. A much better approach is to adopt in your town at town meeting a stormwater bylaw, creating a stormwater board empowered to adopt uniform BMPs for the town. You know, BMPs for stormwater have to apply in upland areas, not just within the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. So they should be uniform throughout the town. By the way, you know, reduce flooding, accommodate climate change, eliminate risks of pollution, make streets and roads, sidewalks and the like safe, not overwhelm your utilities. It's a town-wide matter. Okay. The draft says it's okay to use hydric soils, if you will, peat and muck, as resource area indicators in certain situations. I'm just an English major, but I've written dozens of regulations and state statutes, and I find these provisions on hydric soils in these regulations hard to understand on paper. I know they're hard to apply in the field, and they will generate lots of questions and uncertainty. The draft imposes a new legal requirement, actually a prohibition, on zero impact on any listed Massachusetts endangered species. Let me say that again. These regulations would prohibit any impact by anybody on any listed endangered, rare, threatened, or of concern species under the state law. This means the commission could never authorize it. This makes the commission into a wildlife and plant protection board. It's likely to be challenged, in our opinion, as being beyond the authority of the bylaw, especially if the commission were to implement it everywhere in town, protecting endangered species that have no connection with wetland or water bodies. I will point out that the state Endangered Species Program, that's called MESA, Mass Endangered Species Act, is not this draconian and is not this unrealistic. It's a permit program. It's very hard to get these permits. You have to show why you should get one, or then you're encouraged to avoid the need to get one to affect species habitat. But it is possible for scientific projects and others to get permission to take a species or to alter its habitat, provided you negotiate an agreed or required mitigation plan, substitute land, endowment of a mitigation or improvement of habitat program. The state program does not just ban everything in listed habitat. I'll add this zero impact ban on species being harmed seems to us to be vulnerable to legal challenge. Since the wetland bylaw in your town is not an endangered species law. The bylaw is limited to regulating work in and near wetlands and related bodies of water and the floodplain. And it protects wildlife habitat, not the creatures or the plants themselves. I hope that distinction is clear enough. The State Act protects endangered creatures and plants. Your bylaw does not. Next, to change the subject completely, these regulations would ban all septic systems in any resource area or their buffer zones. By the way, the buffer zone is defined as an AURA, aura. It's the same 100-foot area around resource areas. But this set of regulations calls it the aura. All septic systems would be banned in wetland resource areas, related bodies of water 100 feet away. That's the buffer zone. And I will say this is a very large geographic area in your town. This is a ban on all septic systems. On a lot of upland. Floodplain is upland. The 100-year floodplain is mostly upland. And yet this would simply ban septic systems. This ban far exceeds state DEP Title V and any Board of Health rules you might have for septic systems. Any bans you find in Title V or any local rules you have prevent things being too close to significant wetland resource areas or public or private wells or water bodies or highly dynamic zones. These are called velocity zones in the ocean area. And the ban here, therefore, the ban on septic systems would apply regardless whether the land on which the septic system is proposed is significant or insignificant to wetland or water values. And regardless whether the Board of Health has approved the septic system under Title V and under any local rules, and the system's not going to have any demonstrated adverse impacts, it would be just banned. On this score, let me broaden my observation. This outright septic ban, meaning the commission could never allow a septic system, even if the Board of Health has already, seems to prevent reasonable development of real estate that's been held by people as developable and taxed by the town as developable lots. This might make lots now legally undevelopable because you heavily rely on septic systems, maybe entirely. Seems to me also this may prevent desirable redevelopment of lots if you involve building new septic systems or ones in different locations. It may, depending on how you interpret the wording, also prohibit updating the existing septic system just because it's a good idea. I don't know how the grandfather protection would be administered. It's unpredictable. So in summary, these rules assume that septic systems should be banned everywhere because all of them are unacceptable because of impact to wetlands and water resources, no matter where they are in town. A better approach is what the DEP regulations for wetlands did about septic systems. The legal rules of DEP for wetlands under the Act tell the Conservation Commission you should assume a Title V compliant system protects water and wetland resources and groundwater. In other words, it's approvable because the design and operation will be enough to satisfy state rules to protect water and wetland resources and groundwater. These draft regulations reject that. Now, the state rules do, however, allow the commission, the Conservation Commission, to regulate the location and construction impacts of a septic system. Of course, it's the presumption I mentioned is just that the system designed and permitted is presumed to not pollute the water and wetlands nearby too much. A much better approach than this set of regulations to make the Conservation Commission your septic system police is to adopt your own town Board of Health regulations. Comprehensive regulations for septic systems, tougher, tighter than Title V in ways you want. You have liberal authority going back 100 years in Chapter 111 of the General Laws. Chapter 111 for Boards of Health allows all kinds of powers, including promulgating local septic system regulations tougher than Title V. You can have regulations for septic systems, packaged treatment plants, shared or community systems, tight tanks if you want to allow them where there are emergencies or buildings or businesses that can't do anything else. And the point is the rules would deal comprehensively with permits and plans, groundwater depths and perk tests. You already know this. Locations and setbacks, different treatment methodologies, performance standards, pumping and maintenance, reports and remedies, retrofitting new technologies on a schedule the Board of Health may want to require. That's where to regulate septic systems as septic systems. Okay, we're rolling right along here. Dry weather conditions in two places in the proposed regulations allow different kinds of site testing methods. All I'm going to say is that the regulations about alternative site testing methods in dry weather conditions are very complex. So these had better be supported in the written record. By that I mean the legislative history of these regulations as to where the commission got these dry weather testing methods. And they better be supported by a consensus of professionals who practice in the field so that you can be sure these are actually appropriate and doable. Now, I already mentioned that an aura, or the buffer zone by any other name, the 100-foot distance around essentially the vegetated wetland types, has some regulations, and the regulations here will protect that as a resource area. In other words, not just a zone around wetlands where you do a look-see. The way I put it in English is that the buffer zone is protectable for its buffering function. But I read in the regulations that what's inside an aura, what's inside the buffer zone, may under no circumstances be replaced or removed. And I assume that means replaced or removed and replaced. With the result that over time, these regulations intend that everything in the buffer zone will eventually be gone. I'll say again, the buffer zone is a very large geographic area in town. It includes a lot of backyards, maybe even front yards, municipal properties and commercial and industrial and the like. So I recommend that a graphic be prepared to show under the definition of what's the buffer zone or aura, where in town are they? What's the geographic area covered? And what work activities and structures are now in the buffer zone that the commission wants to ban and slowly get rid of? by preventing replacement. Okay, turning to an administrative procedure. We do suggest that towns adopt what are called administrative permits. That is a simplified permit process for simple projects. The town of Barnstable pioneered this approach. It decided that simple, repetitive, easily controlled, reliably conducted small projects with boilerplate conditions and routine check can go forward safely, and they don't need to go through a full notice of intent hearing and recorded permit in the Registry of Deeds. We favor that approach, but to do that, you have to provide that in the bylaw. The Conservation Commission cannot just bootstrap that it wants to go lenient on small projects or simple reviews. The bylaw is the bylaw. It says no person dredge, fill, remove, alter, broadly defined, these resource areas and the buffer area around them. So the commission doesn't have authority to create the simplified procedure in the regulations until the bylaw is amended to include this good idea. Now, a very serious reservation we have is that in the draft regulations, the provision remains allowing the commission to impose as a permit condition that the applicant create, execute, and record in the Registry of Deeds a conservation restriction or an easement or a covenant. These are all real estate agreements that become binding in perpetuity, unless they say when they expire, because they're recorded in the chain of title. Now, to record something in the chain of title, you ordinarily have to get the permission of the lender or our bank, or possibly other owners or joint venture participants or others with legal stakes in the property. But my point is only that when your bylaw, old as it is, says one of the conditions the commission can impose as security that the permit will be obeyed is a CR, an easement, or a covenant, that's illegal. And to repeat it in the regulations now is double illegal. We don't understand why this provision is still in here. After we pointed this out, we're not making this up. The reason a CR or other exaction of real estate interests favoring the town could be an illegal taking of property is the United States Supreme Court in decisions over the last three decades. I hope they happen to be called the Nolan, Dolan, and Kuntz trilogy of cases. It has to do with boards imposing permit conditions that exact too much. It's not a maybe. This law is reflected in decisions of the Massachusetts Attorney General on municipal bylaws and has been reflected for decades in the written advice of the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions. We raised this flaw in our prior comments, and we cannot understand why this provision is still here. We're almost done. The draft regulations start to introduce climate resilience measures. That's good. But there are just two. These regulations would require 2-to-1 compensatory flood storage. That means inch for inch or foot for foot of volume of flood storage lost by a project has to be replaced. And not just 1-to-1, but 2-to-1. That's useful for several reasons, including climate adaptation. And also the regulations say that one shall use the NOAA Atlas 14 instead of USGS data for stormwater calculations and calculating the floodplain. The bylaw, however, does not have climate resilience as a legal protected interest of wetland and water resources. It doesn't require climate change impact mitigation, or it doesn't require carbon sequestration in wetlands. By the way, they're really good at carbon sequestration. So the bylaw needs to be amended if you're going to be even halfway serious about integrating climate considerations into your decision making. The commission's very limited to those two things, essentially, if you don't amend the bylaw. Now, how are you going to amend the bylaw? In a good way, where you can rely on, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Well, the good news is the homework's already been done. Over the last several years, there have been grants given to regional organizations and others, and the MACC has popularized and publicized them at 2 annual meetings in 2022 and earlier this year in 2023. How to build climate considerations into regulations. Whether you want adaptation, mitigation, and resilience, or you just want to have calculations and engineering protocols to minimize risk, you can decide. But the point is, the actual wording of the amended bylaw is in the source materials. And the actual wording for regulations we recommend is in the source materials. I have given you in my email an active link to the source materials. The options that the commission and the town should review are called Climate Smart Wetland Bylaw Regulations, published by the Natural River Association, and I've given you the site. This is the nuts and bolts of building climate considerations into your bylaw and regulations without a lot of agony or even debate. This linked reference I've given you is legally authoritative for the actual wording recommended for bylaws and regulations. 2 more points. Please eliminate the references in the draft regulations to the Wetlands Protection Act. That's it. These regulations say, well, these are to flesh out the Wetlands Protection Act. No, they're not. They're to use home rule power to go beyond the Wetlands Act. In several places, the draft regulations say something like, these are intended to assist in the interpretation and administration of the Wetlands Protection Act and bylaw. Now, it may sound just like a distinction without a difference, some kind of distinction only lawyers would make. But this reference should be to the bylaw only. It is legally dangerous to say the purpose of the regulations is to pretty much implement the state act the way DEP has implemented it, maybe a little bit beyond. If you don't eliminate saying these regulations are to flesh out administration of the act, the commission is at risk that its submittal requirements that are tougher, its decision criteria that are tougher, its permit decisions, which may be tougher, the conditions imposed, which may be stricter, and enforcement actions that you want to take will be vulnerable to being preempted by DEP rules, policies, and decisions. Now, there's a term that is used in Massachusetts wetlands practice that describes the preemption by DEP having rules or policies or decisions on appeals or enforcement actions that negate or nullify what a commission wanted to do that was tougher. It's called being degraced. There's a court case decades ago called the degrace case, DEGRACE, and it said the conditions under which if a commission is no tougher or uses a provision no tougher or doesn't ask for anything tougher than the DEP, then if someone appeals to DEP, that's the end of it. That nullifies the tougher restriction. I've written all this out so it can be better understood. I can't understand why this is still here in this draft, because the grace doctrine has been around for years and years and years. Now I turn to our final comment, our overarching comment. It's our prior comment on the original draft. Your basic bylaw dates to 1987. It implemented a bare bones model that was circulating at the time. Similar to, but not exactly identical to, an MACC model bylaw that was promoted as a bare bones bylaw that would have, 106 bones like the human body needs to function. But your bylaw is so out of date, has missed so many updates that have been promulgated or are recommended by MACC and different versions approved by the Attorney General for towns all over Massachusetts, now that about 212 towns have these bylaws, that it, in our opinion, it's legally inadequate and insufficient to support this set of proposed regulations. Now, why is that? Well, these regulations are large, they are long, they are detailed, they are comprehensive, they're aggressive in ways I've touched on. They make a new era in wetlands permitting, and several things are banned outright. And we don't think that the bylaw, being so old and out of date in ways that really actually make legal difference, is adequate. At the very minimum, we recommend that this bylaw be amended to adopt the current MACC model bylaw, which has been approved routinely by the Attorney General, so you'll have no problem predicting approval by the Attorney General after town meeting approval. Plus, you can add the climate considerations that I've recommended. I can supply what towns have done, including Boston, which is a leader, but more to the point of a town, what Hingham has done and what Arlington has done to tailor what they want to do on climate to their situation, which is different town to town. This step to update at least to the MACC model has been taken by many, many towns, and this would solve a lot of the problematic provisions that I've identified in the regulation. It would not solve all of them. It would not solve anything that I might term as overreaching legally beyond the authority of the town or conflicting with other realms of law or sets of criteria or standards or management practices adopted by other agencies. But having the MACC model bylaw would go with climate considerations added, would put your town near the forefront of a modern bylaw that would amply support many or most of the regulations that this commission would like to promulgate. Thank you for your patience in having me present that.
Thank you very much, Attorney McGregor, for that detailed run through. I appreciate that, having not had a chance to speak with you yet, and I don't know if Eric, if you did as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Would you mind if we ask you a few questions?
Please do.
Okay, Eric, do you have any you want to? And
Well, just the one question I have is, it would seem from what you're saying, if I'm not mistaken, that to adopt this new bylaw, the MACC model bylaw, would be a relatively simple process. Is that
Yes,
not
it
true?
is. Yes, it is. Usually it doesn't engender much debate. However, you can add and subtract to it as politically you might wish to satisfy this or that constituency. You know, it's a piece of law that you want to put through town meeting, so you'll do the usual. You'll have a hearing on it, at least one. You'll publish the full version in the newspaper. You'll invite public comment during a public comment period. You'll designate some one person to answer questions that come in, and that means phone calls, texts, emails, or visits to the office, and you'll know what the answers and keep track of the answers. So at town meeting, you can say you answered them. You might anticipate a constituency might beef because they don't know about them, or they're a little unfamiliar territory, and you might have to make an outreach to them, not wait for comments.
Do an information.
Go ahead.
session outreach.
Yeah, you
do
put
an
out, you put out a written explanation. You don't just zing out the bylaw like any bylaw. If you were going to amend the zoning in some comprehensive way, you put out a white paper or an explanatory memo that explains it correctly. Next question.
Well, a little off topic, but maybe, what would you consider the select board's role in this whole process being? 'Cause I know the Conservation Commission sort of charged with actually amending the, regulations, and just where do we fit in, I guess, if you can answer that question.
Yes, you're the chief executive officials of the town. You actually are the gatekeeper for town meeting, although people can file petitions and force you to put things on the warrant. And everybody looks to you for massaging proposals so they are more acceptable or understandable, at least. Arranging for opinions of town council if needed, making sure the planning board holds a public hearing before town meeting on any zoning change, you know that. And deciding which town meeting, special or regular, are you going to do this? I should say spring or fall. Most towns would not put this on a special. However, as chief executive officials, you want to know that the laws, that means the bylaws of the town, are understandable, coherent, and acceptable. I don't mean meeting the demands of the lowest common denominator politically. I mean advance the interests of the town in general. You know, like, should we pass this? And is it written to accomplish what we all like? And of course, people want to know what your position is at town meeting. Now, if there's cost involved, you want to consult with your advisory committee or your whatever you call your advisory committee on finance to make sure they understand if there is any cost. And so you can report that because that's a predictable question at town meeting. But in general, as the chief executive officials, the reason you hired me to do this review is that you are the risk managers. You want to make sure you're protecting the coffers of the town. You don't want to be paying to defend unnecessary lawsuits. That's where the review is of a commission decision under the bylaw. If someone has a beef about the decision or the bylaw, it could be anybody, but the hearing is in court. Now, it's streamlined, it's on the record. It's a type of review called certiorari, but it's on the certified record, but it still costs money to defend. So you're right in wanting to be alerted to any legal issues that might be inherent in adopting. And especially if someone came to you with planning board regulations, which don't require a bylaw to be legal, you might be more lenient and forgiving and flexible and creative. But with the Conservation Commission, there must be legal authority in the bylaw, the enabling act, the empowering bylaw. So whatever's in the regulations, you have to see exactly where the authority comes from. What words? And if there's a question of doubt, you can look up court cases to see how those words have been interpreted in other cases. Like I explained to you about cumulative effects and the general standard of don't cause unacceptable cumulative effects. City of Boston versus Quincy ruled a commission cannot just rely on that general criterion. They have to have fleshed out, that means written down, objective standards for someone to try to meet. So the Quincy denial of Boston's project to rebuild the bridge to Long Island was overturned by the high courts in Massachusetts because Quincy hadn't done that homework. That was an expensive court case all the way up to the high courts. So anyway, Risk, management, risk avoidance is right in your bailiwick. And by the way, if
That's
someone
sort of
does,
been our
excuse me, if I'll finish.
operandi. So here.
What's that?
That's been our modus operandi. So it's good to hear that from you.
Good,
to
good.
back up that feeling.
Right, and I'll be even more practical. If someone sues your town, you know who's in charge of deciding whether to defend and how long
Right.
and what to settle for. You know who's in charge. Look in the mirror. It's
Yeah.
the select board. So if someone were to sue the town over these bylaws saying they're not supported by the bylaw, or by these regulations, not supported by the bylaw, or if someone has a permit decision and they're denied and they have a legal complaint and it goes to court, you will be deciding whether and how long and how much and what lawyer should defend the town. Or you can decide not to defend. You can say, fold the cards. That's called confessing error. It means just we're not defending. Or you can defend it till the cows come home. You know, all the way to the high courts. That's your job. Welcome to the select board.
Thank you.
Thank you. We should have probably let us all know that about 6 years ago.
Next question. Those are good.
This is a question about substrate underground streams in the regulation. I know Becky has a little bit more information on this, but could you speak to that slightly for a minute or so? I'm sorry. Underground streams. The underground streams.
Okay, I'm going to put it in a legal context. The Wetlands Act does not protect groundwater as such. For that matter, it doesn't protect surface bodies of water as such. It is not a groundwater pollution law. There are other laws on that, but not the Wetlands Act. It protects groundwater from what people do to wetlands connected. Are you with me?
I am.
The jurisdiction of the Conservation Management Wetlands Act hangs on, is attached to wetlands, broadly defined, water bodies near the wetlands and the floodplain. And in, the coast, areas subject to tide, areas subject to coastal storms, and the banks, beaches, and dunes. So if a conservation commission were to say, well, we don't like that, we regard that as a loophole. We want to be the groundwater protection board. If you're going to do something to the groundwater, you need our permit. I think they're going to have a problem legally.
Good to know.
So
Good to know.
there are instances where commissions want to range far beyond their authority to regulate, I repeat, work in and near bodies of water and their associated wetlands and floodplains. However, we recommend that the town have a separate bylaw with a separate committee or board with separate regulations on stormwater or groundwater protection, or use the Board of Health power to protect groundwater better from septic system effluent. I hope that helps a little bit. If you need more, write me a question.
We will. I did have another question too. When I read through the regulations and read through what you have given to us and listen tonight and hear the word banned.
Ban, yeah.
Banned. I get the feeling for myself that there is a infringement on private property rights of private property owners. We have almost 800 private property owners here in Shutesbury. And I just didn't know if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure, I'll address that a little bit. I'll address that a little bit.
Sure,
all right.
Just a little.
Here's how. When a town wants to ban a type of use or a type of facility, or a type of activity. It uses zoning. Okay? It does not use the Board of Health except to ban nuisances. It does not use the Conservation Commission except to ban work that hasn't been permitted. It doesn't ban growth, doesn't ban lot sizes by telling the planning board, hey, do that under the subdivision regs. Land use control, especially prohibitions, is traditionally zoning. For several reasons. First of all, traditionally it's in zoning. Secondly, in most towns, zoning has to be adopted with a higher vote. So you get a higher majority, 2/3. Now I realize the Zoning Act's been amended to allow you to decide to approve certain kinds of things by regular majority vote, but by and large, over the decades since the 1930s, there's a better protection against willy-nilly land use bans. Now, for instance, if you wanted a moratorium on sewer hookup, if you had a sewer, or water main hookups if you had a water system, you would do that in a zoning moratorium bylaw. You know, you wouldn't just vote that one night at the Board of Public Works. So insofar as it's a prohibition or a ban, in general, it's zoning that is appropriate for that. Now, on this situation, there's another observation. Wetland law since the 1960s has been a type of law I call get a permit. In fact, most environmental law, federal, state, and local, is you need a permit to engage in environmentally harmful activities, and the permit will decide if it's okay. Now go to EPA, go to the Corps of Engineers, go to FERC, go to DEP, go to the State Fire Marshal, go to your Conservation Commission, go to your Board of Health. It's a permit program. So my observation is that it is unusual in a permit program set of regulations to say you need a permit to do stuff in vernal pools and the 100 feet around them. And we can't give it to you. We can't give you any permits because all work and activity in a vernal pool is banned. I find that unusual, and I'm advising you I wouldn't entertain it unless someone maps out where are these vernal pools, or at least does a survey of eligible vernal pools, because as the Conservation Commission noted in these regulations, they occur everywhere in town, and they can be as small as a puddle. So if there's going to be a ban on replacing a beat up swing set that's out in the wet meadow back there where the salamanders or the turtles hibernate or lay eggs, you probably should know about that ahead of time. Same thing with banning everything staying in the aura, or the 100-foot buffer around vegetated wetlands. I realize it's a sort of amortization program. That's the legal term. Well, what you have there now is okay, but don't replace it. Well, what do you mean? Parts of houses are in there. Backyards, garages, pools, patios. What's the reason? What's so important about 100-foot around wetlands where you can entertain work in the wetland, but you can't entertain anything new in the 100 feet outside it? Do you take my meaning?
Yeah.
I'm observing. It's unusual. I've never seen it. You need a permit to do anything new in the aura, but we can't let you do it. And by the way, don't rebuild anything that's there. That's unusual.
Yeah, that's one thing also that popped up at me in the regulations was the fact that there is the clause that says the current landowner is responsible for prior landowners' violation of regulations, and it's their expense to fix it.
Can you repeat
that-
that? Can you repeat that full statement?
Yeah, I'm paraphrasing here, but one
That's
thing
okay.
that jumps as you're speaking is that there's a clause or a sentence in the regulations that say the current landowner is responsible for prior landowner violations of regulations or things that might violate, and that's their expense to fix. So say I believe it means if you inherit or if you purchase a piece of property and 40 years ago there was some damage to a wetland, and it's discovered that the current owner is responsible monetarily and to fix it. So is
Okay.
that something that sounds unusual?
Well, if that's a question you want answered, I will be happy to answer it. For tonight, let me say this. There have been court cases under the Wetlands Protection Act about how long is too long, and things become legal. Okay? What is the statute of limitations for DEP and Conservation Commissions to go against violators of doing stuff without a permit? The answer is 2 years. However, the State Wetlands Act says you can go against a new owner for an old violation for 3 years.
For how many?
3. Each time a new owner acquires the property, theoretically, they are liable for past violations for a window of 3 years' time. I told you the statute of limitations is 2 years, but under the Wetlands Act, which was amended in 1990, continuing violations, like permanently having changed the land by filling in a wetland, that's a continuing violation, so the 2 years does not expire. However, if the property is transferred, the DEP or the Conservation Commission or private citizens, the 10 citizen suit law, can go after the new owner for 3 years. Now, that is not the statute of limitations or the deadlines for Conservation Commission enforcement. And if this commission decides to adopt its own statute of limitations or provide its own 3-year window against the violators who took property that has been permanently violated, that has to be in the bylaw. No ifs, no ands, no buts. And I bet you that'd be debated at town meeting. But you can ask me what the deadline is for Conservation Commission enforcement under a bylaw. You can ask me, hey, when are people home free from violations? When does the thing they built or the work they did become legalized by the passage of time? That's called a statute of limitations. And you can ask me what I think that might be. It hasn't come up in cases. It has not come up in court cases. So it's not a problem yet, but we'd be happy to answer that if this arises from these regulations.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, did you have any more?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so we exhausted the subject and the audience.
No, actually, I don't know how to talk, so I've just been
You
sitting.
didn't know how to talk.
Hang on one moment. The select board hasn't decided to ask, just to have the public weigh in yet. And Attorney McGregor, we only had you till 7. Will you take a couple of comments from the public?
I think we ought to cut it off, and you can distribute my email. Because I bet you, I bet you that will explain things to people.
Yeah, it will. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
And I invite anyone here to email the select board if you have any questions, please. Attorney McGregor, we appreciate your time and your detail and your thoughtfulness and helping us with the very important work. We do appreciate it.
Yes,
You're
thank you.
welcome. We enjoy this work. We enjoy the law. We enjoy creating new law, which is this proposal. This is proposing new law in Shutesbury. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
I'm leaving. Bye-bye.
Bye. Enjoy your evening. All right, so now we're on to the next item, which is Mary Jo Mafia. I believe I saw her on screen. Presentation for Knotweed Task Force. Hi, Mary Jo.
You're muted.
Oh, you're muted. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you. Can
Okay.
you hear us?
Okay. Thank you so much for having us. I've had this idea for a long time to start a task force to help work on knotweed. And knotweed, I don't know how many of you know what knotweed looks like, but it is one of the top 10 invasive plants in the world. It is incredibly invasive. And, if you think about a stream with a fishing hole, basically it eliminates all shrubs, all trees, all plants, all insects, all vertebrae. It just takes completely over. There's no food for the fish. So there's no fishing hole. And in addition, the way knotweed grows, it doesn't hold back banks as well. It has rhizomes. So flooding is much more prevalent for example, in the hurricane in Vermont, Irene, that flood where they had knotweed on rivers, there was much more flooding. So there isn't even a fishing hole. And then besides that, you can't get to the river because there's 10 feet of knotweed. It's incredibly invasive ecologically, but it also is infrastructure, transportation, right-of-way passages, very destructive. It can, if there's like a tiny crack in a culvert or even a foundation of a bridge, it can actually get through there and try and have cause more flooding and more damage and more economic problems for right-of-ways, for transportation areas, for rivers. Oh, it's incredibly difficult. And in England, where it's even more pervasive, homes that have knotweed have a lot of trouble getting even a mortgage or insurance. And we certainly don't want that to happen here. So something really needs to be done about knotweed. And so we've started a little task force, and we have been very fortunate that Brian Collier, who's an expert on knotweed and did an invasive workshop a while back, is volunteering his time to help us. And so I just wanted to introduce Brian, and he's going to say a few words.
So Brian, thank you for being here. Just give me 1 second. Can the person that's on screen with simply a K as their name please identify themselves for the minute? Again, the person with the letter K on screen, can you please identify yourself or we will have to remove you from the meeting? What is your name?
Can you hear
Go
me?
ahead. Yes, what is your name?
Hi, Kathy.
Oh, Kathy.
Yeah.
Kathy. Thank you.
Sorry. I didn't know how to, I couldn't use that. It's not, I don't know how to use it.
That's okay. I gotcha.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mary Jo, and introduce Brian again.
Yes, so Brian is an expert. He's worked in Vermont. He worked after the hurricane in Vermont, and I just wanted to introduce him. Brian.
Yeah, hi everyone. Like Mary Jo said, we did meet at an invasive event put on by the library. Knotweed is my expertise. And while Mary Jo is getting things off the ground and trying to figure out the shape of what it is that she would like to do, yeah, I'm happy to make sure that she's on the right track. I love seeing this kind of thing where, you know, a grassroots thing can get going. Happy to help out with it, to help her get on her feet, and hopefully, you know, prompt some work. Whether for me or someone else can be figured out another time. So I'm just happy to see it happening because, you know, if you guys want to know more, I'm happy to chat, but it is a multifaceted problem. So yes, I'm real, I'm here, and I'm happy to help her.
Thanks so much, Brian. Brian is lovely to work with. It's just been delightful to work with him over the last few months. So one of the big problems with knotweed is eradication is incredibly difficult. And that, unbeknownst to me, Becky has spent number of years trying to get rid of knotweed in Shutesbury, especially around the town hall. And they worked very clearly with some very good guidelines. They had volunteers, yet it's back. So knotweed isn't one of those things that we can just sort of say, okay, we're going to do it and then we'll be done. It's going to be with us for forever, really. And to really be effective, we have to have a yearly sustainable effort. It's not something, and I was a climate activist pretty much 24/7 for 8 years, working on some impossible things. And climate activism is really difficult because it's such a big thing. And like, how does putting my solar on my roof help, right? You know, what can we do? But this knotweed, and I don't know if people know what knotweed is, if there's a possibility for me to share my screen briefly at the end to just show people knotweed so they can recognize it.
I'm making you a co-host now.
Okay, great, thanks. So it's really difficult, but this is something that's right here and right now. And it's something difficult, but we really need to do something, and we need to do it urgently. And I'm gonna let Pam Osketsky talk a little bit about her feelings about Shutesbury and why it's so urgent that we work quickly in Shutesbury.
I can't seem to get the video to figure out, so I don't know, I'm not maybe so adept at this, so I'll just speak. I'm sorry that you can't see me. I've been fiddling around with it here and I still can't figure it out. So yes, knotweed has been a large concern of mine for many years now. I have been actively involved in supporting pollinators for more than 20 years. I have, you know, a pollinator garden at the front of the Irving Elementary School. And so one of my largest concerns is with the loss of our pollinators. And I'm sure there's tons of articles in the newspapers and about the loss of our pollinators, and as in particular our bees. But there are other insects that pollinate, not just bees. But so insects pollinate 80% of our food web, and they also provide food for our birds. And a team of scientists, there was just an article in the paper about this, but a team of scientists based at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology published a report in 2019 announcing that the United States has lost 3 billion birds. That's equivalent to nearly 30% of the estimated North American total in 1970. And the decline of our insects is one of the reasons for the loss of birds. There are others, but that is one. The bottom line is invasive species displace our native plants. And I don't know if you knew that a third of our bees require a particular native plant to reproduce. If that plant is not in the vicinity, those insects disappear. And that's why Greenfield has put together this whole thing for a native corridor so that people can plant native plants and connect, because insects can only fly a certain distance, and they have to be able to connect with another area that has those native plants in order to thrive. Sorry, I just lost my place here. Doug Tallamy, who is a professor of entomology and wildlife biology at the University of Delaware, has written extensively on the importance of native plants in our environment. And he has found that in areas that were invaded by invasive species, there was a 68% reduction in caterpillar activity, thereby reducing bird food by 98%. So 14% of our native plants support 90% of our caterpillars. Caterpillars are food for baby birds. They're food for other animals. And we've all heard about the pollinators disappearing. Knotweed, when left uncontrolled, is going to take over our native pollinator plants that protect and feed these important pollinators. All you have to do is take one look. I don't know if anybody's driven down 63 to Montague and gone into Montague along the waterway. That is all knotweed bordering that waterway. You can't even see the water, as Mary Jo was saying before, because the knotweed is 10 feet high and is packed in there. There can't be a native pollinator plant left in that. And what I'm seeing when I look around in Shutesbury is these areas of knotweed are popping up all over everywhere. I've been watching, I live on Pelham Hill, and I've been watching an area there for years, just getting larger and larger. And now I'm seeing some plants. As I was walking my dog, I saw some other little starts of knotweed right down the road from me. And I'm like, it is so difficult to get rid of. If we don't take care of it, we're going to look like Montague, and Leverett is starting to look like that also. So it's really important that we manage this invasive species, which is the most aggressive and dreadful thing that I see out there. We have a lot of invasives, but this one is just so intense in the way it takes over things. I don't know, Mary Jo, if you wanted to have me, say the last part, or if you wanted to.
Yeah, sure.
It's imperative that we as a community in Shutesbury take the initiative to control this knotweed. And our question to you, the select board, is how can we help make this happen? We have a lot of ideas. For example, taking a lead in finding funding for knotweed control. And we want to take some of the burden off of Shutesbury, the staff, the town workers. And we want to help make this happen, because the time is now before it gets so bad that we cannot take care of it. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's
Mary Jo, you're asking the select board to start.
Well, we want to, we have our ideas, but we want to be flexible and helpful to the town. We also want to do statewide efforts and work with the legislature and work with allied environmental groups, work with other towns. But in Shutesbury, there is, a really problem, and we want to help, but we want a little bit direction from you. We want to do it in a way that works for the town, you as select board people, and for the staff. So we're just sort of asking, we just want to let you know what we're thinking, and then also kind of get any input you have.
So one of the things we can do is, we can review what you've given us and such and think about it, and then we can meet again with you.
That would be great.
Yeah.
If you have any thoughts, like you just said you want to work with state legislature, you could come up with like a little bit of a proposal that gives us like some of the tasks you like to do in Shutesbury and such. We can add that in and then email that to the TA, Becky, and we can talk at another time. We have a little more time and get just a little bit more information from you. But I think you're on a good path. I know Meryl has a question and she's a not lead person. Go ahead.
Well, first off, I want to say, Mary Jo and Pam, thanks for taking this on because it's a really tough issue. But I just wanted to make sure that you knew about 12 years ago or so, I worked on this with Liz Lacey, and we actually did a survey of all 31 miles of town roads and noted every location we spotted knotweed. And I think that would be really good for you guys for a starting point, but it would also be very interesting to see how it's changed since then. And my guess, it hasn't gotten less. My guess, it's gotten a lot worse. So I believe I gave Pam that information already, and I wish you a lot of success and a lot of stick-to-itiveness to keep on this topic. So thank you for doing it.
Just another technical question. We have a flyer that we put together about knotweed, and I'd love it if the people on this in this meeting could get a copy of that. If I was there, I would actually hand them out, but how could we do that?
So we have one of, you can't see it, there we go. We do have this one. What maybe Becky could do you want to make copies have some copies at town hall if anyone wants one?
Yeah.
And Mary Jo, to make it easier, if people either email a town administrator, or I can take this from Becky to make it easier. Sure, her job is already so busy. They can email the select board and we can email it off and maybe connect you with that. Is that
okay?
good?
Because yeah, we have an electric copy, and I also just wanted to say that we are absolutely looking for new members. We kind of waited a little bit before we do that and to try to get the ideas. So you can contact me. My email is Mary Jo Maffei, Maffei 22 @gmail.com, and my phone number is 413-265-6390. So we'd love to have more active members of it. We envision there's a ton to do in terms of education and figuring out best ways forward. So really would appreciate anybody. And if you just want to, even if you don't want to work actively on the thing, but you want information as we come about it, you can send me your email and I'll put you on our email list, and we can, as we find out information, we can let you know. But thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
Do you mind taking a question from the person on the screen? Yeah.
Joanne has been waiting to go for 10 minutes, but
Rob, can you ask a real quick question? 'Cause we do have a tight agenda still and we've got a few things to get through.
Absolutely. I'd just like Mary Jo to repeat her contact information.
Oh, sure. My name is Mary Jo, Maryjo, Maffei, Maff like in Frank, EI 22 @gmail.com. And my phone number is 413-265-6390. That's a cell.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jo. And Pam and Brian, thank you. All right. So we need to move on now. We're going to move on to the Select Board and COA review of the Council on Aging recent transportation survey. Joanne, I believe you are here.
Can you take down the screen share, please?
I got it. I can do it.
Hello.
Marjorie.
I'm Joanne Bernhardt, co-chair of Council on the Shutesbury Council on Aging. We've been dealing with trying to work on transportation issues for seniors in Shutesbury, in particular to medical appointments. And I believe the Shutesbury Selectboard has dealt with this issue in the past, and I've just recently come on board with it. But my understanding is that the Select Board asked for data. Is that right? Don't remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we did a survey which was not very well answered, but we put together the data from that and from our former MedRide program, which was suspended during COVID, along with some comments from the LifePath survey that was done this last year, the results of which came out in February, I believe. And what we see clearly is that most of the residents of Shutesbury tend to go to Amherst, Hadley, Northampton areas, and fewer go to Franklin County areas, Greenfield and et cetera. However, since Shutesbury is already in the Franklin County Transit Authority region, we felt it would be fairly easy to set up the FRTA demand response program for Shutesbury residents who need to go into Franklin County. I did send you today, I don't know if you got it already, a response from Michael Peralt, who was the deputy administrator of the FRTA, and he has detailed in the email that I sent you the procedure for getting started, which is basically only that the Select Board send an email or a request to FRTA to look into starting the demand response program. The demand response program is available to to seniors, to veterans, to nursing home residents, and to disabled people. People register either with a paper registration where people can call for a copy, or online. And once they're accepted, they can book transportation for themselves, either with, again, online or with a telephone number. The vans that they use are handicapped accessible, and they have a wheelchair lift. And they also, they allow people to bring an accompanying person with them. The riders can bring in a person to accompany them. And so I think it would be an advantage for some of our seniors who need medical appointments or other appointments in the Franklin County area. There are two other programs. One is the Access Program, which is not limited by age, which I don't think we want to deal with right now. And there's a MedRide program from FRTA, which has volunteer drivers who take people outside of Franklin County to appointments, which could be used for taking people south to Amherst, Hadley, Northampton, et cetera. So I think it's a fairly simple process to get this going. Do you have questions?
Yeah, that last part, Joanne, is similar to the MedRide program that the Council on Aging had just for our, right? That last.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Is that better? Hold on, I turned the microphone sensitivity down because it was picking up something we were talking to the attorney.
Oh, okay, thank you.
A moment.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So the last part that you mentioned, the med ride that has the private volunteer drivers, that's similar to the med ride program that Council on Aging had prior to COVID, right?
Yes,
Except
it
it's
is.
more widespread. Okay, all right.
Well, except that the FRTA program would take residents of Shutesbury not within Franklin County. It would have to be outside of Franklin County.
Right. Understood. Do you have any questions, Eric?
No, sounds great.
Okay. Yeah, it does sound great. What do you need from us, Joanne, at this point? Do you need
I did
Oh.
send, I emailed you the information from Michael Peralt, and he simply needs an email from you asking that we start the process for the demand response program.
Okay, so
Now,
I just take a simple vote.
there
Okay.
are some caveats. When we had a meeting with Elizabeth Fernandez O'Brien with Village Neighbors. Village Neighbors also provides volunteer drivers for Village Neighbors participants. So that's another thing that's available to Shutesbury residents. There was a meeting with the head of FRTA and the head of PVTA. And the head of FRTA expressed some problems with the fact that, first of all, they don't have enough vans to cover the entire Franklin County area, which, extends into the hill towns on the other side of the river. And they don't have enough drivers. So I think by starting the process, we're going to have to work with FRTA to see what they can actually provide. I don't think we can assume that they can provide everything that we're going to need. However, I think the numbers are going to be fairly small, so it may work out in that way. But there is a problem on the side of FRTA with vans and drivers. But if this takes a year to get going, then that problem may be solved in the meantime.
Okay, that makes sense. So, so they just simply need an email kind of starting the process from the select board, and then you come back to us if you needed anything else, is what I'm feeling? Yes.
Exactly.
All right, so I'm gonna just take a vote to make it official. Do I hear a motion to provide a note or email to, let me get his name, Michael Perot from the Franklin Regional Transit Authority for the ride programs that Joanne outlined?
The demand response, the demand response program.
So moved.
I'll second that. Any further questions? All in favor?
Stalker, aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye. So we'll get that email to you, Joanne, or we'll send it to Michael and then
I can
CC.
send it out for
CC.
you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you
Joanne.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving on to the I'm sorry, my eyes are going wacky.
The approval of the November turkey trot event.
Oh, yeah.
That was this.
Yeah, the Cemetery Commission.
Oh,
yeah. We're moving on
I
to the
apologize.
Cemetery Commission CPA contract review with the select board. And this was brought forth by the Cemetery Commission. Do you happen to have a copy of it?
Yes, I do.
All right. Do you want to give us a rundown, or do you want me
Sure.
to?
This is a new process was established by the CPA this year, that whenever a project is approved at town meeting, that the CPA will prepare a contract between the committee and the select board. So there'll be a standing document in case a project never goes anywhere, never develops. We've had a few of those that have languished for 4, 5, 6 years. At town meeting last year, we actually terminated a project that had been on the books with no application, no further work being done on it. So this is making it an official process and a reminder to the applicant that you've asked for them funds please use them, and if you don't within 3 years, you'll have to return them.
Okay.
Sounds good, yeah.
Do I hear a motion to sign the community preservation grant agreement for the Shutesbury Cemetery Commission?
So moved.
Okay. I'll second that. All in favor?
Stocker, aye.
Makepeace and aye. Okay, perfect. I'll sign up before we leave. Once Rita feels compelled.
Or you can both sign. Co-chairs.
All right. Now we can move on to the turkey trot, November turkey trot event.
Okay, this was brought up at the last meeting. The library is hosting the Turkey Trot event in November. It's a fundraiser for the library building, and it's coming to the select board, having been signed off by Board of Health, Police, and Fire.
Okay. We just need to vote. Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the November turkey trot event?
I approve, yeah, so moved.
All right, I'll second that. All in favor?
Stocker, aye.
Makepeace and aye. Okay, and now we're on to our unanticipated business, which is the recommendation from the Highway Superintendent Search Committee to the Select Board. And there's two members of the committee, or four members of the committee here. Who would like to introduce your recommendation?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I'm Meryl Mandel. And on 8/31/23, we had our first organizing meeting. Invited search committee members included Melissa Makepeace O'Neill from the Select Board, Bob Groves from FinCom, April Stein from the Personnel Board, and myself and Penny Jakes, who are both public representatives, and Becky Torres working as ex officio. And at that meeting, I was elected chair, April was elected secretary, and we scheduled the meetings, learned that Becky had advertised a position in multiple locations and knew they were due the next day, and then all committee members the next day picked up applications and reviewed them prior to our next meeting on January 6th. And at that meeting,
September.
I'm sorry, September 6th.
January 6th, the brand.
Yeah, I know, really.
Yeah, we all do.
So we reviewed the applications and came up with reviewing a draft list of interview questions for both candidates. We had 2 candidates. We made sure each candidate met the basic job description criteria, which they did. And then we set interviews for 9/11, another big date.
Really?
And discussed the evaluation process. So on 9/11, we conducted interview of our 2 candidates, and both had many appealing qualifications and very good communication skills. So we were happy to have a couple of good candidates to consider. Following the interviews, we talked about each candidate and their ratings and qualifications based on our predetermined criteria. And while both candidates rated very highly, Steve Sullivan rated the highest, and the group voted to recommend Stephen for the position. So based on our interviews and the reference checks on Stephen, here are some of the descriptive terms we heard about him. Totally dependable and punctual, goes the extra mile, very outgoing, calm, and reasonable, has served as a mentor to new highway department staff and has good discretion as a supervisor, supports lifelong learning, is comfortable with using the computer for work purposes, handles conflict well, stays professional in tough situations, has driven and maintained many types of equipment, is very familiar with road work and winter maintenance, has great communication and listening skills, everyone loves him, believes strongly in teamwork and team building. So in other words, you can see why, as a group, the Highway Selection Committee unanimously voted to select Steve as our next highway superintendent. And that's our recommendation to the select board that we're hoping you'll act on tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for all that work and being a phenomenal chair and a phenomenal secretary and keeping us organized. Steve, would you like to come forward to the table? Reluctantly.
Gonna get anointed or something?
I know.
Put a sword on his head or something?
This is like a regional school committee.
Right, there you go. Hopefully that's not too seriously.
Yeah, that's too much, I hope.
Right.
Just
So,
lost his law.
this gives us an opportunity to ask a couple of questions there. Did you
Okay.
have any questions you want to ask?
No, I think Steve's a great choice. I have known him. He knows my work. I have no questions, that's great.
And I did also have an opportunity to interview him, and I appreciate you putting in your application and apply for the position. Thank you very much. Okay. Are you comfortable to vote on the committee's recommendation?
I am.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to appoint Steve Sullivan as our highway superintendent?
So moved.
I'll second that. Any further questions or concerns? All in favor?
Stalker, aye.
Repeat, Sonia, aye.
There you go.
And there's a few hands from the public as well.
Oh, I like Gail found us something really funny.
Well, thank you very much.
Now get to work.
Before we get up, though, I really would like to thank Tim Hunting for the 24 years that he put in, because he really did, he laid the framework. So my job is super easy because he really did it up, and the town looks the way it does because of Tim.
Thank you, very nice, thank you.
Well
Thank you.
said.
Very well. Okay. Thank you very much. You're welcome to stay if you'd like to, but you can also. No requirements. All right, so back to, we're at town administrator updates. Well, hit on a couple of them, I think.
All
they're
right,
important.
sure. All right, so town administrator updates. The big one is the culvert. And I just want everyone to know, I did put out a town announce today, the culvert project did start back up last Monday. We are moving along, working on the water control system. The water control system was partially installed before the rain hit on Friday night. Some folks around the lake, one gentleman reported 4 inches of rain in 2.5 hours. So we've had an oversaturation of the site, but it was all well maintained with the help of our highway department. Steve Sullivan went down with me and he found where all the problems were with the erosion controls. Went back to the highway department, got a sock and other equipment and shovels, and went back down, and after a matter of hours had made the necessary repairs that really were important because of all the rain that continued Saturday night into Sunday. On Monday, the MAS Building and Bridge returned to the site and began their work. They started as well as inspecting all the erosion controls and their condition. Their task for that day was to continue to try to put in the final pieces of the pipe for the control. The pipe is being laid 6 feet. They had to dig 6 feet below the current culvert level to make the bypass pipe even with the culvert and the stream bed. So this is quite an interesting engineering task, which I got to observe and hear more about on Monday. So everything is going well. The issue became yesterday that the groundwater level was still very high, And they decided with the rain coming on Wednesday that it would be best if they did not do any further digging today and tomorrow. They'll return on Thursday and by Monday hope to complete the bypass. And then after that, we can begin on the culvert work. That is our most important update right now on the culvert.
So we're still on schedule. I mean, the new,
Yes.
ever-changing schedule is
Yes.
still acceptable, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and, but I do appreciate their working the Saturday and keeping their, to the full time with that, you know, there's no overtime to us or anything, but having them come back is really critical to keep it moving, and that's their goal. The school roof will have its final punch list walkthrough tomorrow. We believe all the tasks have been completed. The engineer is coming back to do one final walkthrough.
And I guess Friday tested it.
Friday tested it severely. We do have one new problem at the school. That 4 inches of rain in 2 hours did flood the courtyard.
Oh, I imagine.
And if you all remember, a few years ago, we replaced the interior windows in the conference room at the school, but we did not and still have not redone the windows at the other end in the library. And when the water backlogged, it seeped into the library, and the new carpet that was just put in August was damp, was quite damp. So the building committee will be meeting at that site tomorrow after 1 o'clock to discuss a potential minor change to the gutters to allow for a more massive flow of water.
May I make a suggestion? Can they drain into a dry well of some sort?
There's 2 dry wells
there
that
is.
exist there, and we're having Carl's clean those out. They came and did an estimate last week, so that might help as well.
Is there a thought to put a drain right underneath where that windows are, so that feeds into the dry wells as well?
From the windows, there's a slope into a graded dry well that's about 6 feet deep, and there's 2 of those. There's one at
This was
each end.
overwhelmed.
It was overwhelmed, I think it was, and what we found in the gutters, that the new square gutter that comes down feeds into another smaller square gutter to fit into a circle.
Yeah, you gotta expand.
So
not
we're
decrease.
necking down.
You're decreasing.
We're decreasing the amount of water that can go, and we found at that end on both sides, water was everywhere around that area. You know, up to 3 feet high, there was water everywhere on both ends. So it's just that the age and the rotted window at one end caused a bigger problem. The other end, there was only a slight dampness at one end of the carpet. So I think it exposed 2 problems. We're gonna, as we still are doing the final punch list, we're gonna request that additional change be made. And then the building committee will get to work on replacing the windows, so the rotted window won't have water.
Will they replace it with something final? So there's no.
It's a wood, and the new one at the other end is a wood that has a final finish. It's what do you call it? Embedded.
To accept splashing.
Yeah, so it was unbelievable. Here they have had no leaking since the roof has been on.
Yeah.
So it's been really exciting, but of course we had the excitement.
Now we're getting down to
of
ground level.
Now we have another issue, but
Turns out if the roof leaks, then all the water would fall in there.
I feel like a window is cheaper and easier.
How many years has this taken?
the roof?
The roof?
Yeah, it's since,
Before I was on the select board, I mean, it's been over 6 years.
yeah.
Well, we're going back to 2011
Okay, so that's
on the
12.
roof. Yeah. 2011 or 2000, no, it's been a need for at least 12 years. So it's very exciting to have it done.
Definitely.
And the crew that, our contractor, Mike's Construction, got rave reviews from the school administration. They found that they were constantly very hard workers, very disciplined and friendly and helpful, and as, you know, they work very, very hard to be neat as well.
So, okay, is there anything else on there? Let's see. Appointment, the library trustee upcoming appointment, is that just a?
Mary Ann wants the select board to be aware that the library trustees are in discussion. They had the passing of one of the library directors in Susie, it was in just a month ago.
Trustee.
Oh, what did I say?
You said director.
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the trustees has passed away, so there will be a replacement of her, and that the select board will need to be involved in, and Mary Ann will contact us after the trustee meeting to explain, to set up another dual election appointment for an elected person. Okay. And
PFAS.
PFAS,
PFAS
I need to do some work on PFAS this coming week.
Okay, so we'll see, that'll toss to the next one.
Yes.
And then the gas at the fire station.
That as well. I have to follow
So
up on
we'll
that
punt those
report.
until the next one. Oh, okay, all right. Well, I think that means we're finished. Right, okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And I'll second that, all in favor?
Stalker, aye.
Thank you, Sonia, aye.
Excellent timing.
Thank you for coming, everybody. We did, I'm impressed with us.
You did.
Thank you all for hanging in, those of you who hung in.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.